roll call. Paul Easterling.
Here.
Maria Griffiths.
Here.
Lou Benson.
Here.
David Yatsko.
Here.
Mr. Pearl is joining us virtually. Paul O'Neill.
Here.
Gary Woolney.
Here.
Brian Cadnam.
Here.
Jacob Studer.
Here.
Kara Pay.
Here.
Kenton Grimes. Tom Schrader.
Here.
Cindy Egelman.
Present.
Jim Bilowski.
Here.
Terry Walrath.
Here.
Chris Kalina has an excused absence. He had a family emergency. David Manley.
Here.
And trustees Melissa Augustine, Jack Swedick,
Here.
and Monique Astral.
Here.
Perfect. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to approve the March 29th, 2022 trustee special meeting minutes. Can I get a second from one of the trustees?
Second.
Seconded by Swedick. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Very good. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Trustees had conversation at the last trustee meeting last Tuesday with regard to how this meeting would be held. The trustees decided that they wanted to take public comment first. I wanted to pose it to this committee and see what your thoughts were, if you wanted to hear from the public first or after you go through your questions. So by a show of hands, how many of you would like to hear from the audience first? Very good. Each audience member will have 90 seconds to speak, and I will open the floor to the members of the audience. Anyone? Anyone?
We're not about to go later, just now.
Right now. Okay.
So after the proceedings, there's nothing we can say?
I don't know. It's going to be time dependent. The committee and the trustees wanted to hear from the folks in the audience first.
Well, typically you would expect to,
I don't know. Okay, so I'm typing everything that's said. I don't know who you are.
My name is Tony Chustin.
Tony,
typically you would expect to hear
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your last name. Can you state your name again? I couldn't hear you.
Tony Chesnick, CHESNICK. You'll have to state your name for the record before you speak. And if you could speak at the microphone so that the virtual audience can hear from you, that would be ideal. Hello. And we have timers going. Start.
I just, you have to state your name so I can tell the record.
Sure. And Nikki Long.
Nikki Long?
Nikki, Nikki, Long, 1941 Parker Road.
Thank you.
Sure. I just wanted to enter this into the record.
This is not a hearing. Okay. Here. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. So really quick, I would like to implore you to include a question or two about water, specifically water in downtown Hinckley. And there's people on both sides that feel very strongly about it, and I can appreciate that. I wanted to give you this information because I wanted you to know how close water is to downtown. So the document here is was recorded on December 19th of 2019. It's an easement for water that runs the length of John Simodi's old property, which is between Skyland and Ridge Road. Okay, so there is an easement here. If you see what's recorded, it's an agreement between John Simodi and the Medina County. No, sir. East of Skyland, and west of Ridge. So if you go to the back,
Blue line.
yeah,
Right here.
See it.
So real quick, because I don't want to go over my time. You can read the easement, but basically it's a recorded document. It's an agreement that exists in perpetuity between Somodi and or any other owners and Medina County. And it's an agreement for 20 feet of easement, the full length of his property. And you can see this last page is a printout it's a tax map from Medina County. The blue line is the water line. So you see that it goes right to that existing water main goes right to the edge of the property.
Can I ask a 10-second question? What question would you like to see on the survey?
I think the most basic question would be, do you want to see water brought into downtown Hinckley? And, it might be helpful just to give them a little bit of information. Hey, the township has $900,000 that they've been given in federal money that can be used towards this, so that they would understand that if the township did use that, maybe that they wouldn't have to pay so much in taxes, or there wouldn't necessarily be a bond, but just giving them all the information possible and just asking the question.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Melissa?
Yes.
Go ahead, Mitch.
I was just asked, I thought there was a point where we said that there was no, Medina itself, the county, or anything in bringing water downtown.
Last time I talked with the county agency, they were not interested in it, but to Ms. Long's point, we do have the ability to use it with the ARP funds for water infrastructure. The trustees have had zero conversation about that, and there are other uses that money can be utilized for.
Okay. Thank you.
Melissa?
Yes.
May I make a suggestion? This is probably something that the trustees might have to answer. I think it might be useful if somebody speaks, and if anybody wants to comment and let the person speak from the audience, do it while we're on topic, rather than waiting to go all the way around.
That's what we're doing.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, perfect. Anyone else?
I have a question for the trustees now.
Can you state your name? I'm sorry.
Dave Yatsko. I was under the instinct that was all green space. How can they put a water line through green space?
That was an easement that was established years ago, and it was protected under the new easement when the Redwood went in, when Skyland was developed.
So was that taken off their lots for how many houses they could put in for that easement?
No, it was already there.
No,
It was not.
It's my understanding that it was there. That's what I was told by previous trustees.
Sounds like there's people out here who want to comment.
Wait,
We're not here to just make comments. We're here to facilitate this endeavor tonight. We've got to get to our questions.
All right.
Anyone else from the audience?
Sure, I'll go. Andy Brogdon.
can you spell your last name?
Brachna.
So there was one thing that wasn't on there that I think is worth addressing. With the senior housing thing going up now, the community's in a bit of an uproar, at least a good part of it is. High density rentals, so multifamily rentals.
You have a hard time hearing you.
Sorry, I'm facing them. High density rentals being addressed in the questionnaire is something that I think is very important. So we've addressed a couple things really well. I feel like that is one that is overlooked, that if we don't protect against it, or at least get the feedback from the community to make sure we make the right decision there, we could end up with another senior housing situation. So that's all.
That's fair. Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, Kenton Grimes has. The floor is open for anyone else who would like to speak.
Careful. Got my timer all set, right?
Yeah. Who are you? Jim Larson, 20 Car Road. And Larson.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Larson. Okay. Starting. This is more of a bigger picture observation on my part.
I would just ask that after you formulate your questions, after you get them all back, and after you determine whether or not you're going to take any action to amend the comprehensive plan and put in what you believe are changes that are appropriate for what you discovered based on the input for that plan, that you make a big difference between putting a hope in the plan or a plan in the plan. There's a big difference between a hope and a plan. So I think what I've seen and read in the existing comprehensive plan, it had a lot of hopes, and one of which was the senior housing project. And I don't think anybody who has seen that senior housing project evolve in the way that it has ever imagined that it would turn out to be a huge endeavor that it is. And I'm sure the hopes of those people who put that in the comprehensive plan never imagined anything like that. But then again, they left the plan to be developed by others, by the zoning commission, by lawyers, by BZA, but they never really said, this is what I want, this is where I want it, this is the kind of housing that I want. And you get the idea, right? So make sure that if you're going to put a plan together, put a plan in, not hopes. Thank you.
Mr. Larson,
Sir.
real quick. I'm sorry, it's Tom Schrader. Sorry. So while I agree with you in principle, I think the understanding that the committee here has, and I think I can speak for most of us in this regard, our task is not to rewrite the plan, and it's a steering committee, and we were tasked with reviewing the existing plan. We do not have the authority to actually change it. We would make recommendations to the trustees, right?
Right.
So I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had a lot of good dialogue over the last few months, and I know, Jim, you're here all the time, and that's fantastic. But it's important to understand that some of these subjects that come up are just way outside the boundaries of what we can and are willing to do and what we're allowed to do.
I formulated that point of view specifically such that it would not be construed as amending the whole.
No, I understand.
Because really all it is a few phrases contained within the comprehensive plan that allowed all this stuff to happen. And I would thought that your task would be to amend some of the language in there, like the 4-use maps and that kind of stuff. I'm not suggesting you're going to change the zoning code because I don't think that's within the scope.
They are not tasked with amending the document. Drive one will consider new language based on the survey results and give it to the trustees.
Well, that leads to the question, what are these people tasked with? We talked about they're mostly a liaison. They're going to formulate the questions. You know, I bet if I put each one of these people in a room and ask them what is your view of what your role is and what your objective is, I'd get 20 different answers because I have no clear understanding of what the heck they're supposed to be doing that.
I'm telling you that's what the conversation has been from the beginning, is that they are tasked with formulating, listening to the public, acting as liaisons, formulating the questions tonight. The questions will then derive our responses from the citizens, which will give OHM planning language to present the trustees. So these guys are done after June 14th. They're just coming in to listen to what the survey results are. They're not putting together language.
Right. I think that's a shame.
That was made clear when we talked about the committee itself.
Okay, fine. Don't agree, but fine.
Anyone else?
Angela Chesnick, Country Brook Drive.
I had like a sample proposed survey question pool that I printed. And one of the things that I noticed was in sustainability, it says it points back to the 2015 plan, and it spoke about sustainability in a multitude of ways. And then it asks a question. So my concern is that how will people that are trying to answer these questions know what they're answering? Because they might not know anything about the 2015 plan. So I guess I'm trying to understand how will they
have a link to that plan.
Well, the no, Jim, please.
2 ways. One, some of the sample questions we've been trying to work on, we put some definitions in there
Okay.
that will define what sustainability is. And you'll hear as we go through some of the questions later. Second of all, there's been discussion. Do you refer back to the 2015 plan within the survey? So if they have a question, to reprint the survey, put a hyperlink isn't going to work because it's a paper survey.
Right.
So if we put a note in here's where it is,
Okay.
they can refer back to it. But I think you'll notice as we start going through some of the questions, we made an attempt, I know I did and some of the others did, to define some of the topics a step further so people understand what the word sustainability and conservation and whatever else may be.
Okay. All right. I guess the only concern I had is that if I do answer yes, I want sustainability because I'm concerned about the environment, would they really understand what their ramifications are to that answer is just a little concerning. So
good point. That's to your point, I think that's the concern that we all have here.
Yeah.
Is having questions, and there was a citizen that was here, this guy right here, that we talked about about wording on questions and how it can, force people down a certain path. So we have to be really cautious not to do that.
Yeah.
And secondly, as a survey taker, I think each citizen has to have some responsibility to understand what they're doing or not do it. Right? It's no different.
Well, that's what's worrying me is that somebody will say, well, I don't know anything about that, so I'm not going to answer that, or you know what I mean? And
it's very likely. I think we all talked about this at one point. There's going to be a bunch of incomplete answers, and I mean that's just part of the deal.
Yeah,
it's just part of taking a public survey, right?
When you vote, not every voter reads about every candidate goes in. So there's always going to be a voter goes, oh, I just like this name or this, and we don't give a test on, their thing before they go in. And that's likewise survey.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, I think that's good if you have like a intro that tells you to go maybe to review it before you start.
Good point.
Thank you.
Thank you. And to Angela's point, there is a document at the end of the packets that you guys all got. And as I said before the meeting, these are the correspondence since the last meeting. So you have everything. The last 2 pages of this packet is the sustainability policy that 350 Hinckley had given the trustees 2 years ago, maybe it was last year as well. And that was what was referenced when we talk about the sustainability. The trustees wanted to hear more from the public as if this is something that they wanted the township to adopt. So in my mind, that's what it is. It's not really sustainability for the township as a whole. But in reading the comprehensive plan, sustainability was a topic for the township. The floor is open if anybody else wants to speak.
John Kalas, 1809 Ridge Road.
Can you spell your last name?
Kalas. I just want.
Apologize for pointing.
No worries. No worries. Good. You remember the face. That counts. So yeah, I mean, pretty much just like she was saying. If there's any way that we could possibly even leave that word out of it, it's just such a. I said it last time, it's such a vague word. It's so broad. Maybe we just go with something like environmental conservation or something like that. It's just, you get this in a survey. Everyone has a different definition of what sustainability means. There's sustainability in my household and just like the neighbor could be different or whatever. There's sustainability in business. There's sustainability for the metro parks. I think they referenced the metro parks sustainability. Plan, what was that, 2019 or something like that?
Yes, they gave us a copy of that.
Okay. And they wanted to base their sustainability policy off of that one, which in the end, like, just from my own reading, and the Metro Parks has how many employees, and it doesn't correlate, right? So I think it would be more beneficial for everyone as a whole to maybe move away from these words that lock us in and are vague to, we're locked in, but we're also open to all kinds of other stuff too. So it would be my recommendation that maybe we just get rid of that word and use, again, something like environmental conservation or something that's more straightforward to the people, right? There's no one in this room that's going to be against environmental conservation. It goes against everything that we say about keeping Hinckley rural and wanting to keep this place, the way that it is. So we move more towards something like that and further away from buzzwords. I think the better off that we'll be.
Thank you. And one of our committee members brought up that point. It's in some of the language in your packets as well.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? Trustees, do you have anything to add?
No, I would just, James Weddick.
I think you should.
I got it. I just would ask that each of you consider every question that you propose as, is it an audit of the existing plan? What part of the existing plan is that question addressing? Or is it actually a zoning question that shouldn't even be included and rather it should be taken up at a zoning commission meeting? So look at the validity of what you're proposing and make sure that it's applicable to the situation.
Yeah, I think to build on that, Jack, and Mr. Larson, you brought it up as well. Part of the things that you had mentioned are actually kind of prohibited from the from the overall comprehensive plan, right? The plan is supposed to give very rough guidelines versus specificity, as you indicated. Then the zoning commission writes that very specific language. So while I respect your opinion and understand your view of having some more specificity, especially around subjects that have a lot of energy behind them, like senior housing, I think that's adding too much detail to this document or suggesting we change that document is maybe inappropriate and really suitable for the zoning commission to adjust the language for the code versus the overall, view from the community.
But I think there will be some topics that come up that have been expressed concerns by the residents over the last couple of years. So if we get a feeling towards, yes, this is a concern, the survey will help say, yes, it's a concern. Then it's up to the rest of the trustees and the zoning to define the plan.
I was almost going to echo that, is that I think we can ask things that maybe are more of a zoning, but that'll be the trustees to take those and determine that, yes, that should go to zoning, not necessarily the comprehensive plan, because I think even OHM talked about some of the things we find will be appropriate for the plan, some will be appropriate for zoning, some will be appropriate for, he had a third one, and where do we take that information? But I agree, if it's okay, I think, to ask the residents, because you're right. Otherwise, you get unintended consequences of, senior housing sounds good until we don't have any idea what people thought isn't what is happening.
I agree with that.
And please encourage everybody to fill out the surveys, because having 100 responses isn't going to be representative. So the more response we get, the higher the response rate, I guess the right way to word it.
Mr. Manley?
The greater the
plan zoning basically is for one purpose and one purpose is only health, welfare, and safety of the residents. It doesn't fit in that. It is not zoning. It's something else. The comprehensive plan is a 10, 12-year look ahead, and it's going to be much more general than zoning would be. You can't identify what's here 10, 12 years from now, so it has to be open enough so you don't tie yourself in.
And, you guys got the email, but maybe the public doesn't know. I think that I stated the date, I think it was back in July. The trustees in 2021 decided publicly that the 3 areas that they would like to see audited are senior housing, conservation developments, and sustainability. But a different word, not sustainability.
Yes, please.
So those were our 3 areas that we picked up on after listening to residents, and certainly you have a big task ahead of you, and I look forward to digging in here with you. The public also doesn't know the efforts that you guys have made in this endeavor, and I just want you to know how appreciative I am of that. These guys are emailing, regular correspondence. Some of them took a questionnaire. So we had the draft questionnaire from OHM, and we weren't able to get a Word document from them. So I recreated it and I sent it to them. And some of them just created a whole new survey. They took questions that you guys had given them. They took questions that we had emailed. Some of them created their own questions or dug through comprehensive plans from neighboring communities. I mean, these guys have worked diligently. On the flip side, I want to thank the public because the interaction and engagement that we have had from you guys is never been seen before. So thank you so much for being a part of this process because it's really helped us to better understand and define what's important in Hinckley Township. Anybody else want an opportunity to speak, Mr.?
Good evening.
I need you to state your name, spell your last name.
David Terry, and I'm a real estate developer. I just hope you have an open mind that you are willing to consider everyone that wants to live in Hinckley, not just a few. And what I mean is that if we don't want people that don't have the means to live here, I think that's wrong. I think there's plenty of room for everybody. I've been turned down numerous times. We developers all have thick skin because we do take some shots from the public, but we just provide for the needs of communities. And I think that by trying to restrict the population, senior housing is one of my big issues that I feel strong in. I happen to be 81 years old, and when I pass on, my wife, she doesn't know where she's going to live if she can't find senior housing. And I'm a supporter of that. I don't know about everybody in here. They're looking around, they're all a lot younger than me. But your day will come. And do you want to leave Hinckley? I don't. I've been here 50 years. This is my home. So consider this for what you're doing is suggestions that we need to meet the needs of all people. We share this world, and we share this city. So keep that in mind when you make your decisions or what you think.
Anyone have questions for him before he
Thank you.
Anyone else? Before we get started on the survey question? Perfect.
I just, Chair Walren, I have a procedural question. We're putting together the survey question. Is whatever we come up with, is that going to be the final version, or will the trustees then review it before it goes out?
That's a question that came up today in our work session. I had to go back and look at our contract with OHM. I looked at the deliverables that we have with them, and the survey is not one of them. Based on our conversation with Arthur at the last meeting, it's my understanding that he gave you what he thought we should use. And he wanted you to go through it and make a determination as what stays, what goes, and what would be replaced. The trustees felt today in our conversation that OHM should be a part of that question process. And to be quite frank, I don't know what the final decision is on that. I said that my interpretation based on Arthur's conversation with us at the last meeting was that you guys would look to finalize the questions, and I have a motion afterward for the printing of them. And if the trustees are in agreement with the questions that you provide tonight, we would move forward with that. And that would be an approval from the trustees.
So in other words, the trustees would have the final sign off.
I mean, we're all here. We can all equally be a part of this process.
I just wondered.
That's a good question. Anybody else?
Aubrey Brachna. You spell your last name. Brachna.
I think the one thing for me is interpreting the questions is more of what's it going to look like in another 15, 20, 30, 40 years, because what you guys do from these questions, whether or not that's going to be, changing the comprehensive plan again, allowing for more development or less development. For me and my husband, we moved here because it's a gem and it is rural. And there's going to be a lot of change, whether it's, in one direction or not. And I would love in 50 years that my son wants to move here, buy a house here, because it is still that gem, and that's really my thought process on it, is which way are you guys leading these questions? And that's, my interpretation. So
thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to, Paul O'Neill, I'd like to comment on what you just said about 20, 30 years and look ahead. And Dave mentioned the comprehensive plan is a look ahead 10, 12 years, but this comprehensive plan was written when?
2015.
And so 10 years from then is when?
20 from her.
This is just a short update. I think we're going to be looking 2-3 years from now doing a new comprehensive plan. So just keep that in mind. There might be things that happen in these meetings that might be useful 2-3 years from now. Might be tabled for later.
Good evening. My name is Marcia Stricklet. You spell that last name? Excuse me, Marcia Cameron, Cameron.
I was going to get you on the wrong name.
I was just testing you. Listen, I really wasn't going to say anything, but, because of the fact that these questions are at the beginning of the conversation versus the end, I thought I'd put my comments in. I've been following this whole process now for about 9 months and listening to both sides, because there basically seems to be two sides. But in my opinion, I think that we really are on the same page. It's just that how do we work together? How do we pull everything together? One thing I think that Mr. O'Neill said was, why don't we look at other developments that have been very successful? And one of the developments I think you should really seriously look at is the Woodlands, Texas development. It was voted the number one, the number one residential development in America in 2021. If you haven't done that yet, I urge you to do that. I live there. My family lived there. What that community was able to do was to have your green space, have your areas where you feel like you're in the forest, and then all along the side, the major development, like restaurants and country clubs and so forth. So what I'd urge you to do is look on the internet, the Woodlands, and see what you think. Second one is Irvine, I've got a sore throat. Irvine Ranch, California, and Western Virginia. Those are the three major national developments for residential living, and also the upscale areas around it. Thank you very much. And by the way, thank you all for putting all this time in. What?
Is Woodland the one in between Dallas and Fort Worth in the airport area? The airport, I mean, in that general area.
If you know where the airport is, the international airport, it's about 25 or 30 minutes.
West or east? East.
Yeah, east of Dallas.
I know where it is.
Yeah, yeah, it's the Woodlands Country Club. It's quite lovely. And my family lived there starting back in 1986. And it's grown, it's developed. When you look at the pictures on the internet, it may look like you have all of this development in the communities, the neighborhoods, but you don't. They've restricted all that from happening. So I think you can have the best of both worlds. And thank you very much.
There are some specific differences. That's not a township.
They were originally.
But they're not now.
No, but what you can do, though, is you can look back historically and see how they got from a small little village built by George Mitchell to turning it over to a developer. 30 years later.
I spent plenty of time there myself and never lived, but
It's a beautiful place. Yeah.
I have an office in Houston. I'm very familiar with it.
Good.
And you're right. It's lovely. Yeah, I agree.
And you can also look at the zoning. The zoning that they write in is I was going to mention something about, how they don't allow trees to be cut and so forth, but it would be a good blueprint to see how do they actually get that continuous feeling, in the zoning, why rewrite something if it's already there and just adapt it to our needs here in Hinckley. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul O'Neill, I'd like to respond to what you said.
Do I need to answer?
If you like, it's up to you. I think there's some real big faults with conservation development, the way it's done. It was originally crafted, I believe, by Petros, a developer, just to increase profit, and then it's been band-aided. I think conservation developments are too big. You have these huge monstrosities that are being put in the town, and then the way they're worded is, and this is something that Jim Larson mentioned to me, you can have one lot that's 20 acres, and there's just a little tiny house, and it's just not crafted properly, and that's not going to happen on this go around. But maybe in 2-3 years, all that can be corrected by a professional that's got the interest of the town at heart, not somebody who's a developer who has profits in mind. And I'm looking at that project on Center Road. It's not bad, but I think if conservation could have been applied there in a better way, that could have come out even better.
But I think we got to stay focused on what we're doing. We can't worry about the plan in 2025. Our goal is to walk out of here tonight with the survey questions, and I think we just got to keep on track for that and then move forward from there.
Good point, Jim.
If anyone virtually would like to speak, please raise your hand. And in the meantime, do we have anyone else that would like to speak at the podium? I'm not seeing anyone virtually. Are you guys seeing anyone virtually with their hand raised? Okay. I'm going to give you one more opportunity if anybody would like to speak here before we dig into these questions. Are you guys ready?
Yes.
Very good. I'm going to share my screen because I have the drafted questions that I had worked on. I will be trying to type along the way. Please don't make fun of me. I'm not a good typist.
I'm hoping, and I'll state my opinion, I think we need to scrap 90% of what OHM did. I know we've gotten a lot of different submissions and ideas and questions. So it's almost wondering if we better off using that as a baseline, but understanding that I think some of his questions were not in line with where the direction that we thought we were going.
I really agree with you. And actually, one of my first questions I was going to ask you was, are there specific questions that you just want to get rid of?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so.
Can we start the other direction on what we'd like to start with?
Can we use it as a baseline? Use his form as a baseline and kind of go through it?
This is Gary Maloney.
Use it as a baseline and say, okay, like number one we want, number two goes away, and we just run down the list.
We can do that.
Because I think we saw there was a lot of good comments that came in, and it'll change the format, but when we get to that, we can add in those good comments.
Good idea.
Rather than just throwing it away and start a blank piece of paper.
Okay.
I think that's what we talked about last meeting was we were going to start with their list.
The only comment I would like somebody to consider is Instead of yes and no to a particular question, would you consider having something like undecided or not sure? If it's a yes or no, somebody will either skip the question or perhaps pick an answer that they don't believe in because they think you're looking for an answer.
But undecided or not sure one could not lead to any action. If a yes or no would lead a solid, I know how this person feels or how this family feels one way or the other. If it's undecided, then it's better off left blank. If it's a yes or no question.
Okay.
So the first question is, please write down your address.
No.
And I just remind you that all of these surveys are numbered.
Yeah.
I look to you to see if you feel this is a viable question.
No.
So here, real quick before we do this. Everyone keeps talking. I know some of the people's names.
She does.
I can't see. I'm looking at you when you're talking when somebody's talking. Yes or no. I can't. I don't know who said it. So you're not going to have a good record.
It's tough to keep a good flow going, though.
I'm not going to be able to do this.
Can we just some of these vote on maybe?
Talking over each other. There's no way I'm going to be able to do this.
We're going to work on voting and we'll be better at raising our hand and stating our name before we speak.
Okay, because it's like a lot.
So by a show of hands, how many people would like to see, number one, please write down your address removed? 11. Just so you know. Thank you. All right, so we will remove that question. Mr. Walrath?
I have a question. If we take that out, or in any event, will the respondents know that they will be identified when they answer this survey? If they will not be identified, they do not know that they're to be identified, we should tell them that regardless of whether or not they give us their name or address, we will know who is responding.
So what I'll do is, and that's a very good point, is just really quickly type the idea up at the top because we'll put that in our intro. Does that sound like a fair?
Just so they're aware that they will know that who responds to this.
Well, you know the address of the house that I went to.
Brian Cadnam, that was my point as well.
Perfect. So thank you for that. I appreciate it and I agree.
Will be identifiable.
I was just going to say when we did the quote, it will go to resident or occupant, to my understanding. It will not say John Smith at 12 Ridge Road. It'll just say resident.
But up there, yes, will not be identified, but they will be identifiable by the survey number, correct?
So how would you like to word it? Or do you want to come back to that?
Results will be tracked by survey number for authentication. Something simple. I don't know.
The response will not be anonymous.
The response will not be what?
It will be.
Paul O'Neill, it's, there's more than one person in a household. Depends who gets the mail and fills it out before the husband or wife. So in a way, it is somewhat anonymous, not perfectly, but
it is not completely anonymous.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, Paul Easterling, I would say results will be tracked by survey number that is associated with the address that this survey was received. Something along those lines.
That sounds the best. Yeah,
that's good.
I like that.
With the address
to which the survey was received. I'm not sure of my grammar there.
Or delivered.
Sent to receipt.
Delivered.
Okay.
Great.
Don't make fun of my typing.
Doing fine, Melissa.
That's what spell check's for, right?
Yeah. So we can always come back to this because I do want to mention here in this intro a couple different things like no copies will be accepted, and we do have color surveys being printed. So we can come back to that, but I really want to dig into these survey questions.
Okay.
So we removed number one. Number two, how long have you been a resident of Hinckley Township? By a show of hands, how many would like to see this question removed? Okay.
So that's, yes. I was all for removing it until I talked to Jim here. And I think he had a valid point to me, and it's how we use the data. If, we look at it when it comes in and we stratify and see that, hey, people who've lived here 20 years or more are really concerned about this set. People who've lived here 20 years or less or have, more. If we look at it and break it down by the years and look at how they answer the questions to look for trends, different groups of people, have different concerns, then I think it's a valid point. If we're using it to somehow weight a score, like, well, you've lived here 50 years, that's more valuable than you who lived here 1 year, then I think it's completely wrong. So I think that question has validity if it's used as Jim suggested, but I think it needs to be carefully placed in there as to why it's there then.
I would think that would be more viable during an update.
I'm flexible. I mean, that's why we're having these discussions.
Right.
I'm flexible.
This is just that audit process. We really want to be, and if we could get this down and save the township some money to a page front and back instead of 2 pages front and back, I would like to do that. I think you bring up a great point. But I said today in our work session, I don't care if you lived here a day or 50 years, you're a resident to me.
Okay.
Okay, so by a show of hands, we will remove that question. Okay, general questions are gone, friends. We're going straight in. Number 3, and we can talk about the language at the beginning as well, but I kind of want to just tackle the questions first. Would you support the township to conduct and review an update to the current zoning code?
Not applicable.
I agree with that. Anyone else?
There'll be other zoning questions, but that isn't what we're charged with trying to get information on.
Right. So by a show of hands, how many would like to see number 3 removed? $15 on the trustee. Thank you, trustee Sweating. All right.
Can I suggest, Melissa, that we leave the language about the descriptions, though?
Yes, we can do that.
Just to your point, I think it comes up later. Yep.
Number 4, would you support developing architectural design guidelines which would set standards for landscaping, building materials, and other relevant aspects to guide new residential and commercial development? And I apologize, I'm going down because I have the Zoom here and I can't read it.
I think that's deletes because that's, once again, it's the township is not there to tell a person the color, the landscaping, everything in their house, unless they live within a development, which may have its own restrictions. When you buy a lot in development, you know what the deed restrictions are before you move in there. Commercial, I think, will be addressed a little bit later. Ideas for town center, but I think that's not what this local government is in charge with. Is telling people how they build their house and how they landscape their house.
Gary Walning, agreed. I thought that question was aimed at the town center. And one of the previous revisions, I thought there was a comment about the town center and the design, the way it was going to look.
I think we can,
but for some reason it got omitted from this set. Well, Tom Schrader, we could just remove the residential portion. Right. We want to focus it on commercial, which I think, Gary, I agree with you. I think that is the intent. Jim, you're like mine as well, right? We should focus that on. Right. The part of living in a township is not having to have somebody tell me what color my doors allowed to be. Correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we don't want that. But in a town center, I thought that was a community effort to say, what do we want it to look like? Yep. And we would have some vision there. Yeah. So let's reread that. Can we just take that residential?
If we reread it, would you support developing architectural design guidelines which would set standards for landscaping, building materials, and other relevant aspects to guide new commercial development? And do we want to be specific in town center?
I would. Yes. I would say yes within town center because that helps the future.
And by a show of hands, who is in agreement with the new language?
I have an observation.
Okay, before we do our vote, Mr. Woolrath?
I agree 100% with Jim. However, and I don't think that the township should do this. But there's a difference between that is my position, but there's a difference between that and asking the citizens if they think the township should do that. To me,
I'm unclear on your statement.
Well, to me, it's not an illegitimate question to ask people, even though we don't think the township should. It's not illegitimate to ask the public if they think the township should.
Township can't though.
Yeah, I disagree because it's a township. It's not a city or that can put in different restrictions like the city of Hudson can do within a township. It's not right to ask the citizens, do you want something that the township per the ORC or legally can't do?
Enforce, right.
Right. If they can't enforce it, then it's wrong to ask them about it.
I have a zoning inspector that works 3 days a week.
Well, the township does, under the revised code, have the authority to implement an architectural review committee, which would have the authority to do those things.
That would change the question. Would you want to be more specific in the question and say that you would like to see would you like to see the township put together an architectural review committee?
Which would have the authority to institute requirements for landscaping and exterior design. I don't think that we should, but that's just because I don't think we should.
Right.
That doesn't mean that the population shouldn't have the ability to say what they think.
It's a good point.
Paul Eastern, I think maybe the question would incorporate both those if you said, would you support the development of an architectural review committee with the goal of setting standards for XXXXX for developments in the town center?
I think Terry's suggesting it's residential as well.
Yeah. He's suggesting 2 questions.
Yeah.
Break it into.
Can I ask you guys something? If you reference the paragraph in there, in the existing 15 comprehensive plan, did you look at that paragraph that it references?
Brought it up here. What paragraph is it again?
CI period 3.
Page 56. References the town center.
Yeah. This is specifically town centric. You're correct. Yeah.
So the question wasn't worded around town center.
The point is if you read the comprehensive plan, it speaks to developing those standards. This question is saying, do you want to go ahead and do what the plan already has in it to do?
Right. So we should remove
why ask that question? It's already in there.
Yeah.
Well, that may be a question at a meeting. Okay, let's get a plan. Let's get a committee together. But it's not in reference to auditing this plan.
No,
that's my point.
Jack, you're 100% correct. In fact, it specifically says establish a design review district to guide the appearance and design of future development in the town center. So I think it's a moot point. We should remove it. Unless we wanted to include something from residential.
So Kenton Grimes, I know some comments had come up from attendees in the past talking specific to conservation developments, and the design oversight seems to fall to the developer versus having strategic plans by the township, as in how certain certain open areas would look. Or offsets and things like that. Sure. So I'm listening to this, reading that question, wondering if instead of scrapping it, it can be reworded to gear in residential, like a question related to that kind of, do we want something in the comprehensive plan to bring more oversight to conservation developments or other residential developments to specifically require certain steps or certain aesthetics that meet what rural has been defined as,
and that's exactly OHL said to do that. You're exactly right.
And I think the township has already made changes to address some of the stuff in the conservation districts already. They may concentrate over the last year, I think it was. Mm-hmm. There was a couple of changes with setbacks and stuff they've already addressed.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that necessarily it needs to change, but we're talking about getting the voice of the residents. So I'm just thinking, is it a question worth asking?
I think if we can a little bit later, I have a suggestion for conservation, which may address what you're saying, which we can bring up at the end as we're moving through these.
Okay.
But like we said, the objective here, based on what's noted, the CL3, page 56, is specific to
Town center. Yeah, and it's already in there.
Kara, did you have something to add?
Oh, no.
Okay.
So we're going to remove this question? Is that where we're at then?
O'Neill?
I'm sorry.
Yes, I agree with your point on there should be something in here on conservation development. I've heard a lot of people's feedback where this isn't setback or zoning question. This is an architectural thing where all the garage doors face front and every unit in there looks the same. Can't we do a little better than that? Or guide the developer to make it look the way our impression of Hinckley is, not what theirs is.
And I think that is the intent. And I actually would like to see this question with senior housing, in my opinion. What does senior housing look like? Do we want to have a architectural idea as to what it looks like?
So this would be for everything other than regular R1 or regular. So
yeah, this is
senior
town center. So do we, by show of hands, are we eliminating this question?
One other, Paul Easterling. I think the question you said is developed here in the current plan for the town center. But I think if you ask the question, do you support an architectural review committee for new residential developments? I think that gets to more what Paul is talking about and asking the community, do you want to have guidelines for new developments? And is that a question that we want to ask? We already have it here in the plan currently for commercial development downtown, but we don't have anything for residential development. Is that something that Hinckley as a larger community would like to see?
Thoughts from the committee?
Oh, I was just going to say, cut the question, stick it at the end of the survey, and come back to it, and if it needs to be placed in a different location. But I think as it hits the objective of CI3, it's already spelled out in the comprehensive plan. So asking a question about, do you want the comprehensive plan to do what the comprehensive plan does? It's kind of a
No, we took the word residential out, so it no longer does what the comprehensive plan states.
Well, no, the comprehensive plan specifically states town center.
Right, and so are we asking about areas outside of that?
Yeah, but I think
with residential, we added town center.
So town center was in the draft he gave us.
Oh, commercial development
added residential to that, and
the new residential. There's no new residential.
So I can't do that.
Right. There's new residential. There's no new residential going in the town center, right? So that's
perfectly valid.
That's not something that's done. And the question is, do you want to have guidelines on new residential developments?
But then I think we're getting into a wormhole. Someone buys a 20-acre lot and wants to build a house on it versus a development. But see, now we have to get into more definition. We're kind of getting into a rabbit hole there. If we're telling someone who buys a large plat and wants to build a house on it, whether it's a farm, whether it's just an independent house, you see, we're kind of getting into a rabbit hole, I think, if we start going that direction.
Cindy Engelman, actually, if you look at the comprehensive plan, page 38, for conservation development requirements, the first action item is to encourage the incorporation of architectural standards as part of each PUD plan. So just as we have already incorporated in the other section about town center architectural standards, we do already reference in the plan architectural standards for conservation developments.
I think the offset there is that the developer creates that versus the township or the citizenry having some input in it.
But
right?
in terms of the plan, it's already saying to encourage incorporation of standards.
No, I agree.
And third-party review. So, are we asking again a question that's already been asked and answered and is in the plan? If there's something in terms of refining how you want to approach architectural standards, I guess. But that's already been kind of stated in 2015.
Yeah, it was stated, but it was stated without a formal architectural review board or committee, which is what the zoning allows for. And I don't think it's all bad to ask you support the actual creation of that committee rather than that, oh, no, so we just kind of support the developer is going to make some standards. And, you know, for a developer, that standard may be all the garages are going to face forward because it's cheaper to do it that way, you know, and we're not having, I think, asking the township, do you want that board to put input into that is a valid point.
You know, it's falling under zoning regulations. And to me, when I read this question, I would even eliminate the architectural review committee and ask really if they would support the zoning commission creating or defining architectural design guidelines
for
the zoning resolution. It's under zoning regulations and as a whole. Conservation development, senior housing, town center. Do you have anything on that based on being a zoning?
Well, first I want to make a comment about standards. We have standards. You know, your lot has to be such and such a size. You have certain setbacks. We have all kinds of standards. I think if we're trying to get at architect, you know, what the house looks like. We have a height maximum. We have all kinds of standards. So I don't exactly know what we're trying to get to in the residential thing. There was a move 25 years ago or whatever it was to try and force the downtown, the town center, to get into a design of such as downtown Medina. It wasn't met very well because of obviously the expense. So I don't know where we're going here. I think
well, downtown Medina too was.
I say asthma. You know, they wanted that.
It was done through private donation.
I understand.
Yeah.
But anyhow, I think that you know, just stay in the town center and stay over commercial stuff because commercial we can argue. Remember, zoning is health, safety, welfare, and a lot of things in the commercial district deal with safety, fire safety, and other safety things. So we do have some control.
Well,
currently,
what I'm hearing is that you like the bones of the question. So do we do what Kenton asked and maybe just kind of copy and paste it to the end and come back to it and see if it better fits under another category as we move through the document?
Yes, sure. Yes.
Sure. I show of hands who are in agreement.
I'm sorry.
12. Okay. Okay. Number 5, in the R1 zoning district, the current minimum lot size is 2 acres. Would you like to see the minimum lot size in the R1 district A increase, B stay the same, C decrease?
If we create a zoning section, I think we have to put definitions in.
There we go.
I'm just trying to read it. I can't.
Yeah.
It's seeing above it.
It says Hinckley Township is composed of the following zoning districts.
I can see it now.
Okay. Well, by my
You had
That's right. That's right. This.
I'm just going to say leave it at 2 acres because if we change it, we could be challenged if we try to make it larger.
Well, we're not discussing whether we're changing it. We're discussing whether the question should be there.
No, it should be. I think it should be there. We should let it stay at 2 acres.
I think we're prepared to take a vote on the question.
Because.
Right?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, can I ask another? Why are we only going after the R1 and not the R2 residential?
We could.
Why have 3/4 acre lots when it's already 2 acres? And why not make it all 2 acre lots?
I believe that the R2 are grandfathered in.
It gets back to that zoning map again, which in one of my.
So why is the R2 grandfathered in but not the R1? I mean, I don't see the difference between the two.
So I'm not following the question.
I don't understand why we're only going.
Why is the question only R1? Why not do the other ones too? Should they be the same? Should they be that size?
Is R2 and some? I need zoning. 3/4 acre, but is it fully developed?
No.
Okay.
Because I know there are dedicated lots.
I'm sorry.
You're right, unless they're already dedicated.
Brian Cannon, sorry. If it's a dedicated lot, I don't believe we can be suggesting that the lot size be changed.
Well, we're suggesting it for R1.
We're asking.
It's the same ask, right? Isn't it?
But
different ask.
But here's why. With an R1, there may be 100 acres that is privately owned.
Yeah.
It's zoned as R1 right now. That's potential. If someone wants to buy or they want to sell off sections of it, this question can be, okay, it has to be 2 acre minimums. It has, whatever it may be, or they want to say it's 5 acres.
So there are no parcels in the township that are zoned R2 that are larger than 3/4 acre?
Correct.
Wrong.
Dedicated.
Dedicated.
Sorry, everyone's talking, so I'm not.
Sorry.
Pine Hills Golf Course is a 3/4 acre, but what they did was they came in with larger lot sizes that exceeded the acreage.
Correct, but how about the rest of Pine Hills, the other 300 and whatever acres that is still the golf
The
course?
actual golf course itself.
Good point.
I don't know if it's an R.
It's
R2.
residential.
It's R2.
Is it?
Residential. Yes.
That was Jacob's tutor.
Good point.
That's a good point.
I'm just throwing it out there.
That's a great point, David.
So do we make it into 2 questions? Separate them for R1 and then R2?
But to be grandfathered, the lot would have to be dedicated down to a, Pine Hills, should they decide to develop and you change it to a minimum through whatever it makes, it's going to be applicable to the new lots that are being set aside. There's no, Pine Hills isn't a series of 3/4 acre lots. It's one big parcel. If it makes sense. It's anybody who's has a dedicated lot.
Right. So I think Dave's point was if they develop that 300 acres, he's saying
it's going to be equal to whatever the regs call at that time.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's your point, right, Dave?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting multiple texts at the same time. We're doing this with folks that want to have the same.
So we're asking the community, R1, R2, what size? That's the question, right?
So could we say R1 increase, decrease, stay the same? R2 increase, decrease?
Yeah, exact same question.
Yeah.
Well, you're asking Jacob's tutor. You're asking a similar question by taking a 200 acre farm and saying we'd like to go to 5 acres. Now you're taking a 200 acre parcel and saying we want to go to 3/4 of an acre or 2 acres. It's an issue for that landowner, I'm sure.
It's the same way with R1 residential also. You're doing the same thing.
I agree.
I like the idea. I see no harm in 2 questions, breaking it out by the 2.
Yeah, Jim, the thing we have to keep in perspective is these are just questions we're asking. We're not changing the ordinances here. We're just asking questions about the question because it was a hot button. Yeah. Right. And it was like, okay, ask the question. It's just a question.
I think this one needs to be there, Maria Griffiths, because if you look all those Keep Hinckley rural signs that were out there, those were all started by a group that wanted to increase the minimum lot size. That was the whole impetus for that. Absolutely. So I think that's a concern for the community that needs to be on here.
And the citizenry agrees.
I'm sorry, who says that?
It's Tony did.
I don't know who that. I'm seriously, I don't know who said that.
Tony Cheston.
And what did you say? I'm sorry.
The citizenry, those folks in the back agree.
Sorry.
Aubrey Brocknut, are you going to change that so it takes up less space? Like just combine the 2 questions?
They have to be separated.
You can't do like R1 increase, stay the same, decrease, R2.
I think cosmetically we'll get to there because my suggestion, you put them across one line, circle which one you want as opposed to 3. But that I think cosmetically we'll see where the questions are at the end.
Perfect. So then we can put this down.
Okay, we're going to move right along to sustainability questions.
Do we want to rename sustainability based on the conversation with our audience?
Maria Griffiths. I like the idea of renaming it. I think we have to think environmental conservation sounds good, but we need to make sure that then that doesn't cause confusion with conservation development, which really has nothing to do with sustainability. And so I'm a little cautious about using the word conservation. I like environmental, but I'm trying to think of a better word to use so that we don't create confusion.
Paul Easterling, can we use 2 words, environmental sustainability?
I like it. That's good.
And I think if we do a small definition within it, something I had grabbed, the 2015 plan contains some elements of sustainability policy, such as recycling initiatives, development practices, protection of streams and waterways, creation of greenways, and preservation. So that's in the existing comprehensive plan. We reiterate what it is, but use the wording change that you suggested.
Mr. Walrath?
I agree with Mr. Kalis. I don't think the word sustainability should appear in here anywhere. It's even if you throw an adjective in front of it, it's still a vague and imprecise term. And unfortunately, it has also become a hot button political term. I believe we should avoid.
Is environmental protection potentially something people might want to?
Think of the EPA and they
Oh, that's true. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Just let me know that when people talk
do the best you can.
Because I think,
preservation, environmental preservation.
Can you guys just try to say your names for her?
Maria Griffiths, environmental preservation. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. That's the first one here.
Because really, what's the ultimate question we're trying to get to with it?
How much is environmental?
I'm sorry, you have to say, it's just like impossible to do. I know, but everyone keeps doing it, you gotta say your name. I'm like trying to look around, but I can't see anybody.
We're sorry.
So say your name again, sorry.
My name is John. Can we just say environmental?
Maria Griffiths, that too kind of gets to a hot button of a group of people who come. I would not use that.
How about environmental stability?
Cindy Engelman, I still don't understand what the specific question is, because even environmental stability, what does that mean? I mean, are we talking about when you cut down 100 trees, we want to see 50% of those trees restored when, something is built? Are we talking about when a commercial entity puts in a paved parking lot, we want to use permeable asphalt? I mean, what precisely are we talking about?
That's why it's in your packet. It's the last 2 pages in your packet. It's a draft that 350 Hinckley gave us. And number 6 is specific to the policy that they drafted us, which is why it's here.
Jacob Stewart. I do like, and I have a copy of Richard Pearl's draft that he sent through, and I like the way he worded the question. I think is a good way to put it, whether we call it environmental conservation or sustainable. But basically, he said, would you support the township in developing and adopting a non-binding sustainability policy for reference by the trustees, zoning commission, board of zoning appeals developers? The policy would specifically outline goals, objectives, and actions. So I think it's a little broader statement, but whether we use sustainability, environmentally, it gets the point across. So
Jack Sweating. Can I ask you to look again at the plan, the reference in there in the plan? Does it preclude developing a sustainability policy?
No.
Is that question necessary? That's my question for this one.
And some people think it's not necessary. Actually, Mr. Pearl and I said maybe it isn't a necessary question.
Paul O'Neill, I think this question should be eliminated because, I mean, some people might read this that, oh, you can't hook up natural gas to your house because that's not sustainable. It's
But again, this is the township adopting a policy for township buildings.
Right.
If you look at the policy, it has nothing to do with the citizens of Hinckley Township. It's not saying that any of you have to do anything. That's one of the things you need. Keep Hinckley rural is freedom.
It's freedom to do what you want to do with your property. That's what it means to me and all of the people that I've spoken to. I don't think that we should ever adopt anything in Hinckley Township that tells you what you have to do to keep your house sustainable. This is a policy specifically for Hinckley Township buildings.
Government.
Cindy, then I would point out that on page 64, under CS3, Enhanced Green Services, it already talks about integrating sustainable practices as part of township services, which would mean as something came up, that would be a consideration, and it may be implemented or it may not. So in that regard, it's kind of already there saying we should look at it. So do we need to ask if we should look at it, I guess is.
And that's what I said. Is it even a viable question?
I would think not.
Mr. Walrat.
I agree with Cindy. I think we should take it out altogether.
So by a show of hands, how many would like to see sustainability, because this is the only question for it, removed from the survey question?
Vote for John.
15, including trustee Sutton. Very good. Then we don't have to worry about the word sustainability. And I hope that you come to meetings and talk to us about our sustainability policy. Housing. We're just moving right along.
Yeah.
Number 7.
We're done by midnight. Where are we at?
Number 7. I don't know what page we're on.
That's okay.
I'm on page 1.
Yeah, it's page 2 of the bill.
Yeah.
Oh, hold on, isn't this the same question we already addressed?
Would you support additional residential development in Hinckley?
There's no stopping. There's no stopping. It's going to happen.
So, in my opinion, dump that question.
Yeah. I agree because how can you tell somebody what they're going to do with their land? If people cared enough, they'd be trying to buy it also.
I agree.
Amen, brother.
I agree with you.
Ready for a vote?
Vote.
All right, by a show of hands, how many would like to see this question removed from the survey? Can you just say all of you?
You got everybody.
Yes, 15.
Both trustees.
17.
More people.
And you can delete.
Call each other again. Where's your matching
So
green?
what's 8 then? Oh, we can.
Yeah.
Yeah, you killed 8 then as well.
I think 8.
Because it tied to 7, right?
Right, yes.
If you answered yes.
Correct.
Well, we can skip that.
I mean, does it make sense to simply reword 8?
I'm sorry?
Kenton Grimes, does it make sense to simply reword 8 instead of, we assume that there will be new development. Is it wrong to ask the preferred types of development? Well, I think that I still think the question in its bones is applicable. Maybe not, if you answered yes to 7, but, select the following types of development you feel are appropriate for Hinckley.
Right, Cadnam, I agree with Kenton Grimes on that. I think that's important, the question to ask.
I agree. If we ask the same questions, if we have a senior housing section, conservation section, are we going to be duplicating the same question in both areas?
I'm Maria Griffiths. I don't think you're duplicating because the others are specific to within conservation development, this, within senior housing, this, but it's not saying, if everyone says, no, we don't want senior housing, then the rest of those become moot. If everyone says we want senior housing, then those next ones are important. But someone may say, I want all 4. Some may say, hey, we should really focus on these different types. And I think we need to know that. So I think this is separate from those others.
But I think if we do it, we have to define what each one is.
Cindy Engelman, maybe you want to put this question to the back so that we can go through the other sections and then figure out whether we need this question or not, or phrase it in a different way.
Table it. This is Paulie's doing, is a senior housing development a commercial endeavor or a residential endeavor?
The one that we have now going in is a commercial endeavor.
Right, so it wouldn't fall into this question to begin with because we're asking about residential development, so it would be A, B, and D.
And technically, because it's a business, it doesn't fall under our housing zoning
Right.
resolution anyway.
So do we want to ask the question, just removing C?
Well, I think the possibility for someone to come in and put senior housing in a residential is a possibility. Right.
Mr. Manley, the zoning where it's allowed today is where? The current regulations.
For R1?
For senior housing, is it allowed in R1 or R2?
No, not really. Well, R2 it could be. It's possible, I think, to R2.
And then, but it's B1 and
B1, yes.
So it would never be in a resident. Well, I guess it could be R2.
The best way I can answer your question without going through the whole book, but the best of my knowledge, it doesn't make sense to put it in R1 because I'm a senior and I don't want another 2-acre lot. I mean, I'm downsizing, remember?
Okay.
So, I mean, the economics of it makes no sense.
But let's use my development as an example. So if the conservation development comes in and says, we're going to be a 55 plus only community, is that a senior housing development?
It could be.
Could
be possible under certain circumstances.
R1. You're R1.
Yeah.
Gets back to the government definition. Senior housing is 80% 55 and over.
Correct.
Federal government's definition.
All kinds of fair housing rules and regulations that go with it.
But, and I don't know the zoning resolution very well, but in order for senior housing to happen, don't they have to have a conditional use permit?
Yes.
Which would make it a business only.
I'd have to go back. Off the top of my head, that makes sense. But I'm at a disadvantage. I don't have the book right in front of me here.
Yeah, I don't need to bring it.
Going way back, that was all planned, what they call plan unit development. So I don't want to get into all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of evolved into what we have here now.
Which is the conservation development.
Right.
We've started. Let's come back to it. If everyone's in agreement.
We agree to table it, you mean?
Just come back to it.
Yes. You're fine.
Okay. Number 9, would you support additional conservation residential development within the township? Yes or no?
One comment first. I think I would make sure with this one, because it is a hot topic, to say refer to definition above, so that again, people really understand what they're answering, because it's so easy to look at that and say, sure, I want to conserve land without understanding fully what that is. And we have a definition up there, but I think that question should say something.
It did. There was a note that said see above, didn't it?
Yes, there's a note right above it.
Yeah, see explanation in section.
Yes, as long as it's the explanation, then I think it's.
Oh, Cindy Engelman, I mean, it might be better to move that definition right with the question, because that's a big paragraph and it's easy to get lost, or bold the word conservation development in that paragraph, so it's easy to pick up.
Or do we just do a dedicated section with questions regarding a conservation development? So we say header, conservation development, definition, questions.
I just think the definition, Cindy Engelman, the definition should be close to the question.
So she's saying move number 9 to number 8.
That's what she's saying, yes.
It's fair. Gary Walney, there was a section on a rewrite that somebody did that. They put comprehensive conservation development up at the top, and that's where you ask the question, so you know what the focus is. Yeah. Because if you do housing and then you bury in conservation development, you're going to miss the definition.
Agree.
So do it all.
My concern.
Conservation development. Here's our question.
Somebody did.
Okay, so I'm doing it, but by a show of hands, who agrees that we should move this question, number 9, officially up to closer to the instructions?
I'm not clear on what you're asking.
No.
I think what we're suggesting is create a heading that says conservation developments.
Which one is it?
It's Richard's, I think.
The one I did.
Oh, it's yours. Okay, sorry.
So I put a header that said conservation development, put a definition, and then we ask all the questions regarding a conservation within that section.
Yeah, I remember. Yep. Right. And there was also a section then for senior housing development, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So housing, broad category, subcategories.
Yes, sir.
See, which is why the one we tabled, I kind of like that first. Give people, okay, what kind of development would you like to see? And then you go down into the sections that kind of scoop down more into what is.
Melissa, if you have Jim's, it's electronically, you can cut and paste.
Yeah, I will. It's just, I don't know that I can do that right this very second. I've got to really find it in my old facility.
Okay. I hear you.
Monique Asherle, or instead of worrying so much about the definition, specifically on this one, what if you put examples? Like if you put example of conservation developments and put Redwood and Walden Pond. You have two very different looking conservation developments, but most people know what those two developments are, right?
I don't know. It's Tom Schrader. I don't know that most people do. I mean, I think some people do, but I don't know that.
How about a picture? Andy Brockton.
I thought the same thing.
Yeah.
A visual show differentiation between a standard development and a conservation development.
But if we define it, I'm just thinking of space.
Right.
And you talk about printing. We put a definition of what a conservation development is. Mention that the township has already tightened up some other things, and then come in with the follow-up questions. For example, are you in favor of allowing additional conservation developments? Yes or no? We've defined it. It's in that section. Does a township need to create additional restrictions for future conservation? Would you be in favor of conservation development if there was a minimum lot size of 1 acre, for example? The idea behind it is I think we come up with the definition of it. It's there. Pictures, I'm just worried about space. If we're trying to...
We just deleted a lot of questions.
I'm sorry, again.
Andy Brockton.
Well, we're going to come up with more.
Yeah, there'll be some added. I think if we get down to 2 pages, great. If we're at 3, then we might also put pictures and go to 4.
I was guilty of conservation, yeah. Or I was more well-informed. It's easy to understand.
I worry with pictures though too, depending on what kind, an overview or look down, it's very different. And then you have to include a Walden Pond and a red, because they're very different. What you put or how you draw it, you can make it look very pleasing or very not so pleasing. I'm more in favor of a definition because that leaves everyone to a more look at what it is.
Do you want to use the definition? Do you have a specific definition that you want to use? Do you want to use the definition? Who has a definition that you have in front of you that you think is the best definition?
Cindy Engelman, here's a sample. Conservation development districts, of which there are currently 3. And
can you tell me which email so we all are on the same page?
Unfortunately, mine didn't get in there in the packet.
This is yours?
Yes. And so it's only the email that I have sent out to committee members Monday morning. But I identify the 3 and I say balances the minimum 2-acre lot requirement with preserving open natural spaces. Homes can be built on smaller lots and the remaining land is preserved. The overall number of homes built is no more than if each home was built on a 2-acre lot. A minimum of 100 contiguous acres is required to create a conservation development district.
Different than what.
Jim, do you want to read yours?
It's not. I don't think.
You know what? I see your email, but I don't see the actual draft of yours.
Right.
It was for that.
Attachment, right?
Yeah, there's an attachment.
You would think there would be.
It's just something that I had created.
I think mine, that's shorter than mine. Mine was.
I tried to shorten it just to,
that's fine.
because it takes so long to read. I don't think we need to say questions related to this type of development in future development. There's a lot. I mean, some of that's just kind of
I read it.
extra words.
I mean, I can read you what I came up with. I think there's a hybrid in between. I like a lot what you said. I just had a conservation development is a planned unit development that allows for the subdivision of parcels 100 plus acres in size with a minimum of 50% of the land dedicated to open space and conserved areas. the heirs use a yield plan, which is that's unique to it, that looks at the total acreage. For example, 100 acres would normally yield 50 homes in our one district, then use the offset land to provide for smaller lots and more condensed housing. For example, the 100 acres had 50 acres of conserved land that would then allow 50 homes to be built on the remaining 50 acres of 1 acre lots in that example. The township recently tightened up some of the zoning language to expand the buffer zone between the conservation development and the main roadway. And there are 3 conservation developments within township currently, and then the questions. But I think yours is a little bit more concise.
Cindy Engelman again, I just tried to stay away from some of those technical terms like planned unit development, because I think generally people aren't aware of what they are. Yes, I agree. But I just try to...
I'm adding it right now so everyone can see it.
Well, I think it's a good idea. I think the difference is if you work in that yield, because that was something that's unique to the conservation developments, is that word yield plan.
Right, but it's also important that people understand that the lot size is going to be smaller, than 2 acres. Because I think sometimes the conservation part, that's great, and then, but aren't the lots going to be bigger? And in fact, they're smaller. So that's what I tried. There you go.
Cindy's language is up here. I just put it under housing, conservation development districts. You'll see it starting right here. This is her language.
I have a suggestion on the question where you're listing all the conservation developments in Hinckley. Why not try to get a little more information back from the citizens? List each conservation development, whether you don't like a little, like a lot, and let people grade each one of the developments.
But why?
Paulie Strong, I find that offensive. I don't want you in a survey talking about my development. You can say whether or not you want the township to have more of them, less of them, but your opinion of what's already been built in a survey is of no interest to me.
Yeah. I agree.
I agree too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so we're in agreement on that.
And especially because we've already...
Cindy Engelman's proposal.
You like the language on that, Brian? Okay. Anybody else have any comments on Cindy's language that's provided? Mr. Walrath?
Terry Walrath. I think it's important that people understand that not only the lots in the conservation and development will undoubtedly be less than 2 acres, they may even be less than 1 acre. They may be, because they can be a quarter of an acre. I think people should understand that as well.
Yeah, I'm Maria Griffiths. I think overall I like Cindy's, and I think we didn't really need some of the things in there about how they recently tightened the thing and stuff, in there. But there is something to say. I agree on something to really get the point across that these are not 2 acre lots, because I do think, and realizing that they're all going to be clustered, it can be, like when you look at some of them, they're right on top of each other. And I just think that needs to, I'm not sure what to add to say that homes can be built on.
Maybe just replace can be built with homes are built on smaller lots.
Yeah.
So it's more strongly stated.
Yeah. And I think and then the questions that we ask regarding that paragraph will help get there.
I like that. I wasn't sure what the piece that it needed.
I got to take a little exception. I don't think you can say are for sure.
Well, we should be saying this homes are built on smaller than 2 acres.
Maybe.
Could be. Smaller than 2 acre lot.
Or it's not a conservation.
But someone does a new one and says makes them all 2 acre lots and calls it a conservation. I think maybe we have to be careful that might be maybe whatever.
I don't think there's anything existing,
right?
But for future, in the future, it could be.
And there, Cindy Engelman, and there could be a home that's actually 3 acres in that development.
Absolutely.
Therefore, having 2 smaller lots or something. So maybe that's why I originally did put in there homes may be built.
Can we add, the remaining land is preserved in perpetuity? It's preserved forever. People need to understand that too.
Let's say forever.
Indefinitely. Can't say forever.
That's clear till next week.
Forever.
Forever.
Yeah, 'cause I actually think in the back of Redwood, and if you're corrected, there's some bigger lots, the new section 3 or whatever, phase 3.
This is Paul Eastling. No, the lots are all still 3/4 to 1/4 acre. Yeah.
I just want you all to know that I just spelled perpetuity right now.
Yeah, that's why I like forever.
Somebody just made a comment.
Or could you say lot size can vary from 1/4 acre to?
I don't think, is there a minimum that it can be? I think.
Is there a minimum?
No.
No, they could be eighth of an acre.
Lot size can vary.
Again, if you're thinking, of course, the senior housing is Dave family and B2, but if you think of senior housing, they're not going to be looking for acres or half acre or quarter. They'd love to get down.
I think we're talking conservation here.
I understand. But
Tom, what if we say homes will likely be built on smaller lots? Just likely. There's no guarantee that they're smaller. It could be bigger. It's likely.
Can be.
Could we say homes can be built on lots smaller than 1 acre? That way we're not telling how small it can be, but it's
smaller than 2 acres.
Smaller than 2 acres.
Well, smaller than 2.
Smaller than 2.
Well, but they could be smaller than 1 also.
Well, 0 is smaller than 2.
Smaller than 2 is different.
I don't think you need to add the 1. My point is, anything, if you say smaller than 2, that goes from 2 to 0. Right. You know what I mean? I don't know that it's.
I understand. Maria Griffiths, I know what, Terry, I think what you're trying to get at is say a lot of people think smaller than 2. Oh, 1 acre, that's not so bad. And they don't in their mind think of half acre lots or quarter acre lots. And so how to get across that these can be really small lots.
Mark Kowalski, how about just vote no lot size?
I'm sorry, so say it again.
Mark Kowalski, how about just stating no lot size minimum?
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question with the conservation development? Does it have to be a subdivision, or could all the land be communal, like in a condo, just like cluster homes? You just own the home, and then all the land is part of the community.
Right.
I can't answer. From zoning, I can't answer your question.
I agree with the gentleman back here. I think he had the right wording. I think there's no minimum lot size.
Yeah, but the question is, could you own your building or own your condo or whatever it is, but not own the land underneath it?
Yeah, and we have no lot size.
But once again, I don't think zoning allows that.
But I think that we get ourselves into trouble by saying there's no minimum lot size, because the bottom line of the day is it still needs a 2 acre lot. So we can't say.
Frank Tomorrow, no, I disagree because.
I'm sorry. Say that again.
My name is Frank Tomorrow. Tomorrow, Tomaro. And I disagree with that because the conservation development such as Skyland, there's lots that are in there that are smaller than a quarter acre.
No, they're not. No, there isn't. No, there isn't.
Smaller than a quarter acre.
No.
But what I'm saying is we are meeting our zoning code. So by them conserving the other land, it offsets the lot that the house is on. So you're still meeting a 2 acres. You can't say we're not meeting a 2 acre because that's going to get us into problems that just aren't creative.
No, I don't want it. I was going to move it over.
Next way, what if we just go back?
No, you're not.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
What if we go back to just saying homes may be built on lots smaller than 2 acres? And isn't it 50%?
Yeah, it's already in there.
It's in there.
Oh,
50% is reserved.
At least 50%.
And at least 50% of the entire.
Of the land dedicated open space.
What if we said homes may be built on no minimum lot size, all remaining land is something or, that conserve to bring back to that 2 acres,
Well, it's just density, right? We already have the density rule in place. Sorry, it's Tom. We already have the density rule in place.
Dave Yasko, I think we're beating this with a dead horse over this question. I mean, it is what it is. We can't put everything in there so every single person understands it. And the whole page, we can make it 2 pages long describing.
Cindy Engelman, the reason why I just had put in smaller than 2 acres, because that's kind of been the issue that people have been bringing forward about, having more than 2 acre minimums, less than 2 acre minimums. So that's kind of just been the hot button.
It's
Yes.
a hot button, but we have never not met a 2 acre minimum in the R1.
But this is for conservation. It could be less. The lot.
It still meets 2 acres because the conserved land.
Right. Well, right, but that's what the rest of the sentence says.
Or it's the yield plan.
So here's my thing that I'd like to put, instead of balance, after the parentheses, I think it should say meets the 2 acre requirement, because it does.
2 acre yield. I think if we use the word yield, and I know they'll put that, because if I hear 2 acre minimum, I'm thinking 2 acre lots, but if it's the yield, meaning that I look at the total amount of land.
San Diego, I mean, you've got to be clear that people understand that don't expect there to be 2 acre lots in a conservation development, because 50% of it is open space. So you are balancing the requirement with having space, but the lot sizes themselves are likely going to be about 1 acre or maybe even less, because at 50%, right there, you're cutting the acreage from 2 acre to 1 acre.
Honestly, the way I'm reading it, I'm pleased with how it reads. I think it's a very basic definition for someone who has no idea what a conservation development is.
Monique Gasserl, I think it's misleading to say it meets the minimum 2 acre lot requirement. I think that for someone who doesn't know what it means, I think it's very misleading.
Yes. Aubrey Brockna, I understand what conservation development is, and I still think that it's misleading. Like, I feel like I don't understand conservation development reading how that's saying that. I feel like a picture, if we're going to have this huge long definition, because it is so confusing, put a picture of an example of the minimum lot size you could see, so people can actually be like, oh, that's what it is.
I understand your concern. I don't particularly like this with the meets, because I agree that's very confusing to imply a 2 acre. Again, you can't put a picture of a minimum lot size when there is no real minimum lot size. It could be a 1/4 acre and 75% is going to a conservation. It's a
Do we want
picture.
to do a picture, or do we want to?
Zillow and Wakefield run.
I'm sorry.
I think the problem we do a picture, it gets into, I think this came up at the last meeting, leading questions. If I take a picture of each development, and depending what picture I take and where I take it, it could lead to a different viewpoint. I think we just.
I'm not saying an actual picture of a township. I'm not saying Zillow. I'm saying a graphic that an artist has drawn. They're all over the internet, where you have a regular conservation development and a standard development. And
Well, each have included something in their
right.
one of their proposals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Paul O'Neill, if you Google conservation development wiki, they have some nice pictures and some nice definitions of what it is. You might want to take a look at that.
But I think the comprehensive plan previously already had some definition in there. I think we want to use the existing definition as not one off the internet.
Right. So if we're looking at one off the internet, we're looking at an image, not a definition.
Tom Schrader, I think the only challenge we had with the one that was up a minute ago was that we didn't address meeting the 2 acre intent for population density or population of homes, right? I think that would clarify, to your point, that it would clarify that it's not a 2-acre measured lot, but the conservation development itself has no more homes in it than if they were 2-acre lots.
Paul O'Neill, what we're doing in Hinckley, or what we have in Hinckley right now, is called a conservation subdivision. I'm going to read this right out of Wiki. This is a development that sets aside a major portion of the site as conservation land and clusters housing on the remaining portion. All in one sentence.
I don't like that. Yeah.
I'm gonna make a suggestion. I edited one from before, but these areas use a yield plan that looks at the total acreage. Then I got a wordsmith it, but then uses the offset land to provide for smaller lots, for smaller lots and more condensed housing. So it's defining that allowed smaller lots, condensed housing, and then it's just an idea on that. And get rid of where I used example and all the other stuff.
Maria Griffiths, I could buy into the meets the 2-acre requirement if you said use these smaller lots and more condensed housing, because I think then that makes more clear that it's not a magic 2-acre thing. And I think saying that way we don't have to worry about a minimum. If you say smaller lots and more condensed housing, that gets across what it really is. In a way that we've been struggling to do by saying lot sizes and stuff.
Would it be simple enough, Jacob Studer, to put in a statement, for example, a 100-acre parcel can only have 50 homes? It makes an assumption that there's going to be 2 acres or less, possibly, correct?
That's incorrect.
And you have your statement about additional open space, right? I'm trying to simplify it. We're trying to go 17 different directions when somebody should be able to read that and understand it. No offense.
This is Tom. Let me actually read the wiki definition. Conservation development, also known as conservation design, is a controlled growth land use development that adopts the principle for allowing limited sustainable development, we'll take out sustainable, while protecting the area's natural environmental features in perpetuity, including preserving open space, landscape, and vista, protecting farmland or natural habitats for wildlife, and maintaining the character of a rural community. The conservation development is usually defined as a project that dedicates a minimum of 50% of the total development parcel as open space. The management and ownership of the land are often formed by the partnership between private landowners, land use conservation organizations, and or local government. Blah, blah, blah.
Melissa, I have a comment. This is Tony Chesnick.
I'm sorry. Say it again.
Tony Chesnick. We're all struggling with this. Think about all the constituents out there. They're not going to get this. We need to give a very simple definition, already worded here, and provide an example. What you just said, when I drive into some of these conservation developments, and that's a code word, conservation. People what do you mean? Think something else.
Oh.
But when I drive into some of these developments, that's not what I see. What you just said, I don't see that at all.
I think all three, I think meet that. I think that.
No.
What do you mean specifically? I'm curious. I'm not sure I understand. Well, you're shaking your head, but I'm looking for an answer. Seriously, I don't understand.
I don't want to debate it with you.
I'm not debating. I'm trying to find information. That's all.
I think we need a simple explanation and an example.
So I'm asking for the example of no.
Example that's specific to Hinckley.
Okay,
like some of the other conservation developments we have. Because people can go see for themselves. There's nothing better than
yes, it's listed. Have all three listed. That's all there is.
Right. I agree.
Okay.
I think what we have here is good. Some of the comments made already that there's no minimum lot size that hits your front and center. Along with the other verbiage we have here, along with the examples, I think that's perfect. People don't know they can go see for themselves and make a decision for themselves.
I totally agree with that.
Kara Pay. Back on the audit from February, the 22nd, there's a great picture in here that just shows the difference of the conversation versus traditional. Can you see that?
Are you on Zoom?
No.
You're not logged into Zoom. I was going to say you can share your screen.
Oh, no.
Can you email it to me?
Yeah, you all have it too.
I know it was.
What I mentioned earlier.
I mean, it's perfect. It's exactly what we're talking about here because there's land around it. Yeah, I can get it for you.
I do too.
All you need is this picture. That's it. Like, simple as that.
I agree with what Maria said earlier. If you use any kind of a picture, just one picture, even two pictures or diagrams, then people think, oh, that's what it's going to look like. When in reality, it may not look like that at all by the time it's done. You know, there are many different types of development designs. I think if you use a picture or a diagram, you're misleading people as to what it could possibly turn out to be.
Parapay, I think that I understand what you're saying, but it's just generally speaking, we're just trying to keep it simple. I mean, we know that there can be all different kinds of things, but in general, that the houses are closer together with density and the open land is available.
Cindy Engelman, I think the one phrase you use is condensed housing, and maybe in the definition where it says homes can be built on smaller lots, resulting in condensed housing or something like that. You know, and then
I could buy into that because overall I like your definition.
Then when you think of smaller lots, condensed housing, you know, you could talk about 3/4 acre lots because it brings it together, and that may be something you do want to do.
I was going to say, Sean, Tara, I was going to say the word either condensed or cluster, I feel is imperative in that paragraph because that's what this is.
I would use condensed because I think cluster could be misled to think of cluster homes, which are connected, and that would be misleading in a very different way too. So I think you have to go with condensed.
So use your definition and provide for smaller lots and more condensed housing.
2 acre lots
with more
resulting in
condensed housing.
Simple.
Yeah, I like that. And then we could just keep this definition.
Right.
So 2 acre lots, comma, resulting in
more condensed housing or whatever the right way of
housing, right?
Good question over here.
I just wanted to add, Heidi Goodwine, sorry.
Okay,
I would like to answer.
You said
Heidi
so
Goodwine, sorry, because I'm so fired up. Heidi Goodwine,
can you spell your last name?
Gutweim. I sit here and I don't say anything and it just builds up. I'd like to further what Sean was saying. That definition is so much fluff. First of all, conservation is the wrong word. I don't care about the Ohio Revised Code. Conservation was the wrong word for these developments. There's nothing about it that's conservation. Where in, I'm sorry, but Redwood Falls, do we see this buffer? You know, they paint this picture of these communities like the development that's next to Redwood. I don't know what that one is called. Okay, that's beautifully done. That is what Hinckley is to us. That is how we feel. That definition, I see the word preserve at least 4 times up there, and the buffer, it's giving the illusion that conservation developments are these utopias of beautiful properties. And I don't see any of this buffer or this preserved space when I drive past Redwood Falls. I see homes.
Well, we have already made changes to the zoning resolution.
Right, but what I'm saying is that definition to someone who hasn't been to the meetings, who isn't involved with all of our conversations, that reads as, wow, this is great. They're preserving the land, which is not what it's doing.
Hey, Melissa, how many acres, Big Asco, how many acres are up at Redwood Falls that can no longer be touched, no longer developed, that it's going to sit there and be,
I do not have that number. Dave,
it'd
that's a
be
great
close
question.
to
50, I would,
100.
It's half.
It's half. There's 200 acres on it.
200,
so there's 100 acres up there that's no longer going to be built.
Where are they though?
it's in the back.
It's all in the back.
Okay. This is, I need a break. Everyone's talking. This is literally impossible for me to be doing.
Okay, let's take a break, 5-minute break. We'll resume at 8:30.
Regardless of what that one is, we need to come up with a definition.
currently 3. Wakefield Run, Vista Ridge, Wakefield Run Preserve, Walden Pond, and Redwood Trails. Balance the minimum 2-acre lot requirement with preserving open natural space. Homes may be built on smaller than 2-acre lots, resulting in more condensed housing, and the remaining land is preserved in perpetuity. The overall number of homes built is no more than if each home was built on a 2-acre lot. A minimum of 100 contiguous acres is required to create a conservation development district.
I move we adopt that one.
Mr. Walrath.
Can I make one suggestion?
Yes, sir.
Remove the last sentence to the beginning. Minimum of 100 contiguous acres required to create a conservation development district, and then go on to explain that there are 3 of them.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Sure, that works.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Is everyone in agreement to move that to the top?
Yes.
Good.
Sure.
Okay. Did you have something to add?
No, I was just saying yes. I was letting the recorder know I was saying yes. That's all.
All in favor?
Put your name tag in there.
This is Nikki Long. Can I make one suggestion, Nikki Long? I would ask you to consider to add in there that homes can be built on and are taxed at less than 2 acres.
Absolutely not.
No.
Because we've gone
That's
through
not
this
true.
before. A home in a conservation
That's not true.
development has water, sewer, and are oftentimes of higher value, which is why they pay higher taxes than a home on a
But
traditional.
they are
sewer.
taxed on their lot size.
No. They're taxed on their
Taxed on their
value.
value of
Tax on their
home.
value.
I suggest we adopt what was stated.
No one taxes on a lot size. All right, so we have, do we want this to come up here? And do we want to capitalize of which or there? Or we can just say there currently.
Yes.
We have an English teacher.
Keep strunking
it. Okay, so with that said, by a show of hands, how many are in agreement to adopt this definition? 15. Unanimous. Thank you very much. Do we want to maintain the language underneath that at all? Because I think it would be confusing to do.
Yeah, I do too.
I do too.
Okay, so by a show of hands to eliminate the language underneath. Mr. Walrath, are you still reading?
Count size.
We'll say we had 12. Okay.
We want to drop in questions on the conservation here, or we want to wait and come back?
Let's just get through these questions that we have. If that's okay, and then come back. Is everyone in agreement? I like Brian's answer, so I think it'll come out. Would you support the township updating design standards, lot size, setback, landscaping, buffering, etc., that are outlined within the conservation residential development chapter? And this kind of goes back.
This is, sorry, I don't see you're reading.
This is a zoning question.
This is the same question that was adopted for town center, if you recall, that we tabled and put to the end of the.
I say, no, this is a zoning issue that is, I don't think.
That was David Manley said no, it's a zoning issue.
Maria Griffiths, I think this was another one that when you reference it already kind of is in the previous plan, but I think if we're going to do it, it again goes that, would you support a board, for, there has to be a zoning.
Which is already in here.
Which is already in, which I think is already in there.
Okay. Anyone else? Ken said Brian.
Would the essence of the question change if we used, instead of do you feel that we should update standards and such, but change it to formalize the option of, because it's optional in the current revised code, or in the current, right? It's may.
Oh, there's rules. We have rules on
the township may put a board in, right? I mean, isn't that the language in the CI there? It says
Well, I'll read it out loud. Encourage the incorporation of architectural standards as part of each conservation PUD development plan. Encourage third-party reviews of conservation development PUD applications. Require permanent property line markers with conservation developments, stone marker, blah, 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 blah. Require enforcement of open space boundaries for homeowners associations.
So nothing about anything formal other than those required zoning components.
So what if we simplified, say, does the township need to create additional, and my next word may be off, restrictions for future conservation developments, yes or no? Maybe restrictions isn't the right word, but we're just asking, do they need to consider additional guidelines or whatever the right word is?
Or do you use design standards or some kind of standards, additional standards? Because I think additional then references the fact that it's already been, addressed to an extent, and you've even addressed further with the setbacks and this.
So with that said, we would just get rid of the parentheses section right here. Because you just asked me the exact same question that's right there for you.
Update formal design standards, perhaps. Something less arbitrary.
Well, we got to be careful getting into creating zoning. I think zoning has some definitions in there.
Jack Swag, this, again, the existing comprehensive plan does not include doing that. That question is not asking, do we need to look and address that in the existing comprehensive plan? If you look in that section in there, it says develop setbacks, whatever, design standards. You don't do that in the plan, so I don't know why you want to ask that question relative to an audit.
Exactly. I think it's a hot button. The whole general topic of conservation districts has been a hot button. So really, are we trying to get in? Number one is, do we want additional? I don't think we can ask that more. I think about it, but do we need to tighten, create additional restrictions? And then my other question, I don't know if it's going to apply, but the idea behind it is I think we're looking at, there's concerns about it. You've taken actions already. Do they need to, do people want to see additional? It's not asking to act about it. They come back and say yes, and then that's an action item for the township to think about going down the road.
But it's not relative to an audit of the plan. So to continue to discuss it in this venue I don't think is appropriate. That's my opinion.
I respect it.
Cindy Engel, and my question on that question is that last word chapter, is that referencing the zoning resolution chapter?
Yes.
So it's a zoning question.
That's the way I read it.
Correct. And not a comprehensive plan question.
Correct.
Any other thoughts from the committee?
I hate to say it, but I'm gonna. Currently, LU.2.1 reads encourage the incorporation. There would be any suggested change to this document, it would be to modify the word encourage to require. I should read on encourage the incorporation.
Again, don't have a misconception. This is a vision.
Yeah.
This isn't regulatory. This isn't requirement. This is a vision for moving forward.
Jack's valid point. A valid point.
Outside of the plan, then you take the steps you want to do. If you want to have a governmental HOA for the entire township, whatever you want.
Yeah, valid point. Okay.
So does this board, by a show of hands, feel that the question should be removed? Yes, number 10. Sorry. Hold on, I'm counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. 12. Nope, sorry, 13. I didn't see you, Maria.
Okay.
Would you support senior housing and skilled care facilities to be developed in the B1 and B2 zoning districts?
Separating two questions because it's two different.
I agree.
So to Jack's point, it's already in here. It's already in the comprehensive plan. So we're asking the question, like we said earlier, do you want to still support the comprehensive plan?
I'll disagree.
And we're using it right here in number 8 if we stick with this question. We're already asking what they want to see.
But it doesn't address, because this brings up the topic of skilled care, and that's not addressed in 8.
Skill care is different from senior housing.
And also, if the responses come back to the negative, then the comprehensive plan is, it's no longer speaking to the will of the people. So it becomes an auditable area of inquiry.
I think this was the second hottest topic over the last X number of years, is the development, the proposal for multiple developments, the residents' feedback. One was not able to pass. The other one did because it was in a different zoned area, but that one got through. So I think we do need to ask, are they in favor of additional? And then whatever the questions may be around it.
But Jim, to your point, then this would have to be separated, because there is a bright line between senior housing and skilled care.
Absolutely.
Skilled care is listed in the zoning regulations already.
As a conditional use.
Yes, conditional, that's correct.
Within B1, B2?
Yeah.
B1.
It is listed. But is it the same as senior housing?
No.
We have by definition of what's going in and
No, it's a comma and then it says skilled care.
So do we want to separate this so that would you support senior housing to be developed in B1, B2? And then the second question that says, would you support skilled care facilities to be developed in B1, B2?
Can I suggest adding with the senior housing the word additional? Because there is one going in. So would you support additional senior housing within the B1 or B2? And then would you support a skilled care facility in the B1 or B2?
Maybe I'd go, but I understand what we're going at with this, but there's been other senior housing trying to go in an R1. I think that's another question you should ask is, do you support it going into R1?
I don't think it's permitted currently, and I'll have to ask my zoning person.
No, it is not.
But
anybody can come in and you could ask to build a steel plant on an R1 if you want to. I mean,
yeah, then
that right is, it's not
going to be a battle.
That's a zoning battle. Yep. It's a battle. I'm just saying, there's a process. You follow the process.
Very quickly, Dave Manley. When this originally came out back in 2014-15, the thought was discussion dealt with skilled nursing or assisted living, and senior housing being in the same complex where they could go from one situation to another. That was part of, not the only, but part of the discussion. That's why it got kind of linked together back in there.
That makes sense. But if we have responses from these separately and they match, then I would assume if they were both 50%, for instance, you would say, well, then they could go together. Okay, so are we comfortable with the way it reads now? Would you support additional senior housing to be developed in the B1 and B2 zoning districts? Would you support skilled care facilities to be developed in the B1 and B2 zoning districts?
Cynthia Engelman, number 11, with additional senior housing, should we indicate where the current senior housing is planned for so that there's a reference point, because everybody may not be aware of Center and 303?
Brad Cadnam, I think anybody that's going to respond to this survey is going to know that.
And in all fairness, you don't even know what the place is going to look like yet.
Right.
And Melissa, I think we can delete the skip to comments.
Yeah, I'm trying to kind of get to that.
No problem.
So Paul O'Neill, assisted living was mentioned. Is there a bright line between any of these other two uses?
Yeah.
With assisted living, and should there be a third question for assisted living?
Mitty?
Cindy Engelman, I mean, it's a third category of senior housing, so if you're going to ask the other two, you should probably ask that one just because those are the options that are out there for seniors.
That was the intent back in 2015, which is what we're revising or auditing.
Right.
Is there current language in here
Maria, you had a.
Yeah, because if you look what a lot are being built now, and this is the potential when you start going into there's actually independent senior living, and if you look at those like the Danbury or Vitalia that you see popping up everywhere, and most of those then you'll see another building which is assisted living when it becomes you can't quite be independent, and then there's a third building called a memory unit, and most of those come as a group thing. You can't tell one of these big companies, you're only going to build one. It is a grouping thing that are going to come in. I can think of very little assisted living that isn't associated with skilled nursing or a memory unit because, they're by definition, they're only going to have people in some of these for so long. If they don't have another place to put them, there's no money to be made.
I feel this is an umbrella that covers all of those.
Yeah, I think it's hard to separate all those out and say we want just assisted living or we want just a memory care or we want just a this because it's never going to be built that way. That's just not how they're run or make money to do it, and varying with the place. And again, you can't tell a developer what to develop, but if you're looking at a lot of these groupings, a lot of them will do, even when they're their main independent living, they will have small cluster homes plus a big apartment, complex with their main dining hall and stuff. And it's kind of a whole grouping unit. You don't get your choices with it. So I'm not sure how to, it's again, I don't want to ask questions for people that's something what won't or can't ever happen. And that leads people down a rosy path of thinking something's going to be built that can't be.
Well, Paul O'Neill, should it be built in Hinckley or not?
Well, that's what we're asking.
Right, but then the question has to be a whole, thing from independent living / assisted living / memory unit or something as one, not separated out because they don't come separated out. They come as a package deal.
Is that accurate though always? I mean, what is going in down here doesn't have any.
That's all independent small apartments.
That's senior housing. That's
senior housing, right? Senior housing is separate, but when we started talking, we said skilled nursing, and then someone mentioned assisted living. All those don't necessarily come separate.
Oh, okay. So
right.
I agree with you. So we're saying we should that second question should be both skilled care and assisted.
Assisted living.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah,
I misunderstood.
I'm sorry. The senior housing is a separate. I didn't make myself clear.
I think you're right.
Yep. Dave, I got a question for the trustees here. Can the township actually stop a skilled nursing area